Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel Dr. Barkis Ophthalmology Tutorials. Today we will discuss about the next ametropia, that is hypermetropia. Okay, so if you have not watched my video on myopia, please do watch so that it becomes easy to understand this concept of hypermetropia. So in this video I will be discussing about how you define hypermetropia, how to draw the optical diagram of the hypermetropia, what are the various mechanisms by which the hypermetropia can occur, and what is the clinical classification. We will also become familiar with the words like total hypermetropia, manifest hypermetropia and all those, and the symptoms and signs as well as the treatment aspect of hypermetropia. So without much delay, let's begin our video on hypermetropia. So you can define hypermetropia as a refractive state where the parallel rays of light which are coming from infinity are falling behind the retina when accommodation is being addressed. Okay, so it becomes easy for you people if you have watched my previous videos on refraction. Okay, so you draw the optical diagram for the hypermetropia. So this is the eyeball, cornea and the lens. So these are the light rays which are coming from infinity are getting converged behind the retina when the accommodation is addressed. So let me explain the definition of hypermetropia once again with the diagram. So the parallel rays of light which are coming from infinity are focused behind the retina when the accommodation is addressed. Okay, so that is the definition and the optical diagram for the hypermetropia. So next, moving on to what are the mechanisms by which the hypermetropia occurs. You have seen my video on myopia. I have explained the mechanisms by which the myopia occurs. So exactly the opposite things occur with the hypermetropia. So while these rays are getting converged behind the retina, either the axial length must be less, right? So the anterior posterior diameter of the eyeball is less, so the rays are getting converged or focused behind the retina, or there must be decrease in the curvature of cornea or decrease in the curvature of lens. So the cornea or the lens becoming little flatter compared to the normal one. So the curvature is becoming flat means the radius of curvature is increasing. Okay, so you can take it in either way, either flattening of the curvature or increase in the radius of curvature. Okay, so that is the second mechanism by which the rays get focused behind the retina. And the third mechanism is if there is displacement of this lens posteriorly. Okay, if there is posterior displacement of the lens, again there is hypermetropia. And if there is change in the refractive index of the lens. So in myopia there was change in refractive index of the nucleus, but in hypermetropia as we age, because of change in the refractive index of the cortical matter, there can be induced myopia. Okay, even in diabetic patients there can be change in the refractive index of the lens cortex leading to hypermetropia. Even the total absence of the crystalline lens, which can be either surgery induced or congenital, can lead to very high degree of hypermetropia. So these are various mechanisms by which the hypermetropia can occur. So depending upon this, again it can be named like, so if there is decreased axial length and that is the cause, that is called as axial hypermetropia. Is flatter curvature of cornea and the lens and that is the cause, that is called as curvatural hypermetropia. And there is posterior displacement of the lens and that is cause for your hypermetropia, that is called as positional hypermetropia. And if the change in the refractive index of the cortex of the lens is the cause, that is called as index hypermetropia. And hypermetropia secondary to aphakia when there is no lens. So that was the classification depending upon the mechanism of hypermetropia. Now clinically we can classify hypermetropia as simple hypermetropia, pathological hypermetropia as well as functional hypermetropia. So I will explain each one by one now. So the simple hypermetropia is the commonest form of hypermetropia. Here it occurs because of some developmental abnormality with the eye. Either the axial length of the eyeball is decreased or the curvature is flat. So either the cause is in the axial length of the eyeball, that is axial hypermetropia, or there could be some problem with the curvature of the cornea, curvature of the lens. Usually these two are the causes for the simple hypermetropia. And usually it is inherited condition. Inheritance pattern is usually autosomal dominant type. Okay, so these are some features of the simple hypermetropia. So the next classification is pathological hypermetropia. Here again the causes can be either congenital or acquired. Okay, so in the simple hypermetropia also we had congenital as the cause. So what is the difference between simple and the pathological, where the congenital reason is the cause? So in the simple hypermetropia, the variation with respect to the anterior posterior length or the curvature was very minor or little. Okay, but when these congenital variations are gross, that can lead to pathological hypermetropia. Either there can be decrease in the anterior posterior diameter of the eyeball itself, or the curvature of the cornea can be flat. So in cases of microcornea or the cornea plana, there is more flattening of the cornea, so that can lead to pathological hypermetropia. And as we grow, the outer lens fibers may become little flat. Total curvature of the lens can become little flatter compared to the younger population, and that can again contribute to curvature hypermetropia, which is one of the types of the pathological hypermetropia. The next is index hypermetropia. I will explain how this occurs. Then the positional hypermetropia, as I told, if there is posterior displacement of the lens, that can lead to hypermetropia. And the aphakia, either secondary to congenital cause or acquired, like in case of surgical aphakia, that can lead to high degree of hypermetropia. And again, the last one, consecutive type of hypermetropia, that is secondary to overcorrections. Either you are overcorrecting myopic patients with the surgeries, or you are placing intraocular lens with the undercorrection. Okay, so that can lead to consecutive type of hypermetropia. So let's discuss the index hypermetropia now. So in the young age, what used to happen? The refractive index of the cortex was less, okay, whereas the refractive index of nucleus was relatively more. So it was like a nucleus which is surrounded by two menisci of the cortex. So ultimately the converging power of the lens was more. But as we age, refractive index of the cortex increases because of the cortical sclerosis. So it becomes like a uniform lens. So it acts as a single lens. So the converging power of the lens is decreased. So the light rays are getting focused behind the retina. Okay, so this is the mechanism of index hypermetropia. So in the pathological myopia, we saw the congenital causes as the cause, that is because of the microcornea or the cornea plana. Even the acquired curvature cause like the flattening of the lens fibers can be a cause, or because of the change in the refractive index of the lens, or the positional hypermetropia because of posterior displacement of the lens, or it can be secondary to the aphakia, which can be the surgically induced or congenital, and the consecutive hypermetropia. And the third type of hypermetropia is the functional hypermetropia, which occurs secondary to paralysis of accommodation. So the paralysis of accommodation occurs whenever there is third nerve palsy or total internal ophthalmoplegia. So those two are the causes for functional hypermetropia. So now let's discuss some of the words which are used whenever we discuss the hypermetropia, like what is total hypermetropia, what is manifest hypermetropia, what is latent hypermetropia, all those things. So when it comes to hypermetropia, the accommodation plays a very important role. By using accommodation, we can correct hypermetropia to some extent. Okay. So like unlike the myopia where accommodation has very minor role, in hypermetropia accommodation has a significant role. So because of our ciliary muscle, it has inherent tone, and because of that inherent tone of the ciliary muscles, we can overcome hypermetropia for almost 1 diopter. So that is there in all young patients. That is called as latent hypermetropia. So that is the latent hypermetropia because of inherent tone of the ciliary muscles, which can overcome or accommodate up to 1 diopter of hypermetropia. Okay. Here almost hypermetropia of 1 diopter can be overcome by the mechanisms in the ciliary muscle. Then we have something called as manifest hypermetropia. So that is the amount of hypermetropia which can't be overcome by the ciliary muscle tone. So we have what is known as manifest hypermetropia. So this hypermetropia can't be overcome by the tone of the ciliary muscle, but by exerting more accommodation, we can overcome some amount of hypermetropia. So the amount of hypermetropia which can be corrected by exerting accommodation is called as facultative hypermetropia. So we still have some amount of hypermetropia which can't be corrected even by exerting accommodation. It is called as absolute hypermetropia. So we had latent hypermetropia, that is because of inherent tone of the ciliary muscles, and we had the manifest hypermetropia, that is the amount of hypermetropia which can't be overcome by the inherent tone of the ciliary muscle. In the manifest hypermetropia, we have facultative hypermetropia, that is the amount of hypermetropia which can be overcome by exerting accommodation. Even by using accommodation, we can't overcome some degree of hypermetropia, that is called as absolute hypermetropia. Okay, and these two together contribute what is known as total hypermetropia. Okay, so total hypermetropia classified into latent and manifest. Manifest is again divided into facultative and the absolute hypermetropia. Let me explain this with an example. Suppose we have a patient with 7 diopters of total hypermetropia. Okay, so in that 1 diopter can be overcome by the latent hypermetropia. So this patient will have a manifest hypermetropia of 6 diopters. Okay, suppose this patient is very young patient of around 6 to 7 years of age, then they can exert some accommodation to overcome almost 2 to 3 diopters of hypermetropia. So this patient could exert accommodation and overcome some amount of hypermetropia, say 2.5 diopters of hypermetropia is overcome because of the accommodative efforts. So that is facultative hypermetropia. So the child is manifesting with 3.5 diopters of hypermetropia, that is called as absolute hypermetropia. Okay, so hope you have understood this concept. So how you detect all these types of hypermetropia? So whenever a patient comes to you, you will do dry refraction without using cycloplegic. That is absolute hypermetropia which the patient is manifesting, okay, without cycloplegic efforts. And when you use the cycloplegia, you will be abolishing both the facultative as well as the latent hypermetropia. So you will be getting the total hypermetropia which the patient is having. Okay. So you can unmask all the hypermetropia by using cycloplegics. So that is the role of cycloplegics in case of hypermetropic patients. So now let's move on to the symptoms and signs of hypermetropia. So the symptoms of hypermetropia depends upon the age of the patient as well as the degree of hypermetropia or the amount of hypermetropia. So if the age is very less, if it is in the younger age group, they can exert more accommodation and the symptoms may vary. Okay. So the age also plays a very important role in case of hypermetropic patients. So patients can be totally asymptomatic here, like if the patient is having very milder grade of hypermetropia, say less than 1 diopters of hypermetropia, then they can easily accommodate for that hypermetropia and they will not have any symptoms. Second is the asthenopic symptoms like the tiredness of the eyes or the frontal headache or the watering of the eyes. Whenever the patient has little more hypermetropia, they try to overcome the amount of hypermetropia by exerting more accommodation. They will have to constantly exert more amount of accommodation. So there is tiredness of the eyes, there is frontal headache and even the watering, and these symptoms become aggravated as the day progresses and even when they are more engaged in the near work. So the asthenopic symptoms. And third, the patient can have decreased vision along with the asthenopic symptoms. Say the patient has some 8 diopters of hypermetropia and the patient is trying to overcome some 3 diopters of hypermetropia by exerting constant accommodation. So that will contribute to asthenopic symptoms, and the remaining 4 diopters of hypermetropia which can't be corrected by exerting accommodation will result in decreased vision. Okay. Or patient can purely have only decreased vision without any asthenopic symptoms. Like whenever the patient is having hypermetropia of more than 4 diopters. Okay. So whenever the hypermetropia is of more than 4 diopters, the patient can't exert the accommodation. So we just leave that process of accommodation. So there is no asthenopic symptoms, but the vision is grossly decreased. So with what degree of hypermetropia, how much is the vision is shown in the table now. So these patients can have even intermittent blurring of vision. Because of spasm of accommodation, there can be pseudomyopia and the distant vision can become blurred for some time. And that can be unmasked again by using cycloplegic drugs, where you will actually find the hypermetropic refractive error. And as I told, these patients will have the asthenopic symptoms. So because of the asthenopic symptoms, they will constantly be rubbing their eyes. So that can lead to infection of the glands in the lids, leading to either repeated stye or even the blepharitis. So these are the various symptoms of hypermetropia. And how these symptoms vary with the age. So in the younger age group, because of increased accommodative reserve, so they can overcome what is known as the facultative hypermetropia, which I discussed. So facultative hypermetropia will be corrected by the accommodative reserve in the younger age group. As the age progresses, the accommodation reserve decreases and this facultative hypermetropia can become absolute hypermetropia. So the patient will start manifesting decreased vision and the asthenopic symptoms can in the later age group also. And even the presbyopia will start early, like in the late 30s only these patients will experience presbyopia because of the hypermetropia. Okay. So moving on to signs now. So as I told, there is decreased vision. So when you do the visual acuity testing, there is decreased vision depending upon the degree of hypermetropia. When you examine the patient, the size of the eyeball can be either normal or a little small. The curvature of the cornea can be normal or can be flatter. Okay. The anterior chamber depth is little shallow. So these patients will have the narrow angle. You should be cautious of this narrow angle in the hypermetropic patient, especially in the old age patients, like because there is thickening of the lens. This narrow anterior chamber is further compromised. So these patients can have the glaucomatous attack. So be cautious when you are using dilating drops in the old age patients with the hypermetropia. Okay, and when you come to the fundus examination, you have typical findings of the hypermetropia. So when you come to the fundus examination, in the disc, when you examine the disc, it is smaller than the normal, it is highly vascularized, and there is ill-defined margin of the disc. So because of all these three features, it appears as if the patient is having papillitis, but it is not true papillitis, it is pseudopapillitis because of hypermetropia. So this is one of the signs in disc examination, that is pseudopapillitis. When you examine the background retina, it appears more shinier because of greater brilliance because of the light refraction. So that gives the appearance of short silk appearance of the fundus. Okay. In the fundus examination, we had the optic disc findings which will simulate the papillitis leading to pseudopapillitis and the short silk appearance of the fundus. And when you do the A-scan examination, you will find out the actual anteroposterior diameter of the eyeball. What happens if you don't treat the hypermetropia, or what are the complications of this hypermetropia? As I already explained, because of the constant asthenopic symptoms, patient will be repeatedly rubbing their eyes, so there are more chances of infection of glands of the eyelids leading to repeated style as well as the blepharitis. Okay, and because of constant exertion of the accommodation to overcome this hypermetropia, a child can develop accommodative convergent squint, which usually will start by the age of 2 to 3 years. Okay, and there can be amblyopia, which can be secondary to either the squint which happens as a result of hypermetropia or because of anisometropia between two eyes. That is, there is difference with the hypermetropic error between the two eyes, or one eye can be normal, other eye can be hypermetropic. Then the hypermetropic eye will go into amblyopia, or it can be secondary to emmetropic amblyopia, that is both the eyes are having very gross hypermetropia and hence the amblyopia can develop. And since the angle in the anterior chamber is very narrow, these patients are predisposed for the narrow angle glaucoma. So these are the complications of hypermetropia. Coming to the treatment aspect of the hypermetropia, that is the optical treatment of hypermetropia. So whenever you are mentioning about the optical treatment, first write the type of lens which is used to correct the hypermetropia. So here we use the convex lens and the plus lenses to correct the hypermetropia, and this can be used either in the form of spectacles or in the form of contact lens. So when you use the convex lens to correct hypermetropia, the rays of light are made to focus on the retina, thereby correcting hypermetropia. And in hypermetropia, it is must to use the cycloplegic to do the refraction. So the cycloplegic refraction is very much important and discover the total amount of hypermetropia in any patient. Okay, and depending upon the patient's age as well as the degree of hypermetropia, the treatment will vary. Suppose the patient is having very less hypermetropia of say less than 1 diopter without any asthenopic symptoms, then you need not treat that patient. Okay, and if the hypermetropia is more than 1 diopter or the patient is symptomatic like he is having the asthenopic symptoms, then you will have to treat with the correction. The next scenario is the patient with the age of less than 4 years. Okay, so these children of less than 4 years will usually accept the full correction what you give. But once the children become little older, in case of school going age group, they may not accept the total hypermetropic correction what you want to give. So try to undercorrect, give the number which the patient accepts. One thing what you should remember is you should not leave more than 2.5 diopters of hypermetropia without being corrected. Means suppose the patient is having some 6 diopters of hypermetropia. So you can't correct less than 3.5 diopters in this patient. Okay, so 3.5 diopters of hypermetropic correction has to be given. So you have the margin of 2.5 diopters which you can gradually increase as the child accepts the glasses. The same thing applies to the young patients also. What if the hypermetropia is associated with astigmatism also? Then you will have to fully correct the astigmatism and give the hypermetropic correction as I told just now. So till now I explained those patients who didn't have any squint. Okay, so when it comes to the squint, suppose the patient is having accommodated esotropia, then you will have to give the full correction. Whether the patient accepts it or not, you will have to give the full correction when the patient is having accommodated esotropia. If the patient is having exophoria or IDS or the intermittent divergent squint and patient is having hypermetropia, then you will have to undercorrect the patient by 0.5 to 1 diopter, so that the patient has to exert some amount of accommodation to overcome the hypermetropia. Thereby there is some convergence which is happening which will overcome this exophoria or the intermittent divergent squint. And whenever the child has hypermetropia with already manifest amblyopia, then give the full correction and do the occlusion therapy to overcome the amblyopia. So how frequently you should do refraction in hypermetropic patients? As the child grows, the eyeball will also grow, so there can be changes with the hypermetropia. There can be decreased dioptric power of the eyeball. So you should do refraction at least once in 6 months and see that the number is same, or if it is changed, you should change the glass. And in adults, you can give the manifest hypermetropic correction completely. Okay, the refractive correction for this hypermetropia I will be telling in a separate video, which will cover all the refractive surgeries from myopia, hypermetropia and astigmatism. So hope this video on hypermetropia is useful to all of you. If you like my videos, please do subscribe to my channel. Press the bell icon for further notifications. Please do like and share my videos. Leave your valuable comments. Thank you so much.